There are certain names that echo across the centuries, names we learned as children, names that seem to promise something extraordinary. The Seven Wonders of the Ancient World. Even now, the phrase carries weight, doesn't it? A sense of grandeur, of human achievement reaching toward the divine. But here is something worth considering. Of those 7 magnificent structures, only one remains standing today. 6 have vanished from the earth. And while we often speak of their glory, we rarely pause to ask the more haunting question, what actually happened to them? Tonight, I'd like to take you on a quiet journey through time. Not to marvel at what once was, though we certainly will, but to understand how these monuments, built to last forever, came to disappear. Some fell to nature's hand. Others to human ambition. And a few simply faded away, their stones scattered across generations, until even their precise locations became matters of scholarly debate. This is not a story of sudden catastrophe alone. It is a meditation on impermanence, on how even our most determined efforts to defy time eventually yield to it. Before we begin, a word about sources. The story I'm about to share draws from ancient historians, men like Herodotus, Strabo, and Pliny the Elder, whose accounts were written when some of these wonders still stood. We also rely on archaeological excavations conducted over the past 2 centuries, and the careful work of scholars who have pieced together fragments of stone, ancient texts, and local traditions. The concept of 7 wonders itself is ancient. The list we know today was largely codified by Greek and Roman writers during the Hellenistic period, roughly between 300 BC and 100 AD. These were not merely impressive structures. They were, in the eyes of the ancient world, proof that humanity could achieve the seemingly impossible, that mortal hands could create works worthy of the gods themselves. It's important to understand that these monuments were not created by single civilizations. They spanned the Mediterranean and Near East, Greece, Egypt, modern-day Turkey, Iraq. Together, they represented the pinnacle of ancient engineering, artistry, and ambition. Now, let us examine what became of them. World 1. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the sole survivor. We begin with the exception, the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is the oldest of the 7 wonders, and the only one still standing. Built around 2560 BC as a tomb for the Egyptian pharaoh Khufu, it held the title of the world's tallest man-made structure for nearly 4,000 years. But even this survivor has not emerged unscathed. Originally, the pyramid was encased in smooth, brilliant white limestone that reflected the sun's light so intensely it could be seen from miles away. Ancient writers described it as gleaming like a jewel in the desert. Today, however, that outer casing is almost entirely gone. What happened? The answer lies in human need. Over the centuries, particularly after a devastating earthquake in 1301 AD loosened many of the casing stones, builders in nearby Cairo quarried these precisely cut blocks to construct mosques, fortresses, and homes. It was practical, you see. Why labor to cut new stone when perfectly shaped blocks lay ready for the taking? This raises something worth reflecting upon. The pyramid survived not because it was inviolable, but because its sheer mass made it impractical to dismantle entirely. Had it been smaller, it too might have disappeared, repurposed stone by stone into the buildings of medieval Cairo. The Great Pyramid endures, then, not in its original glory, but as a weathered monument, a reminder that even the most permanent-seeming structures are, in truth, constantly being reshaped by time and necessity. World 2, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a beautiful mystery. Let us turn now to perhaps the most enigmatic of the 7, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. According to ancient accounts, these gardens were built in the 6th century BC by King Nebuchadnezzar II, ruler of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, as a gift for his wife Ametes. She was a Median princess who missed the green mountains and valleys of her homeland. To console her in the flat, arid plains of Mesopotamia, the king supposedly constructed an artificial mountain. A terrace structure covered in trees, flowers, and cascading plants, watered by an elaborate system of pumps that drew from the Euphrates River. Greek and Roman writers described it with awe, a lush paradise rising above the desert, its greenery visible from great distances, a triumph of hydraulic engineering and horticultural artistry. But here is where our story becomes complicated. Despite extensive archaeological excavations in the ruins of ancient Babylon, located in present-day Iraq, no definitive physical evidence of these gardens has ever been found. No foundations, no irrigation systems, no contemporary Babylonian texts that mention them. This has led some scholars to propose an unsettling possibility: perhaps the gardens never existed at all, at least not in Babylon. Dr. Stephanie Daly of Oxford University has suggested they may have been located in Nineveh instead, capital of the Assyrian Empire, built by King Sennacherib decades earlier. Ancient writers, working from second-hand account centuries after the fact, may simply have attributed them to the wrong city. If the gardens did exist, what happened to them? The most commonly accepted theory points to a series of earthquakes and the decline of Babylon's irrigation systems after the city fell from prominence in the 1st century BC. Without constant maintenance, any garden in that harsh climate would have withered. The elaborate waterworks would have collapsed. Over time, mud brick structures would have eroded, leaving little trace. But this raises a deeper question: can something be considered truly lost if we're not entirely certain it ever existed? The Hanging Gardens occupy a strange space in history, somewhere between fact and legend, remembered more vividly in poetry than in archaeological record. Perhaps that is its own kind of wonder. World 3, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, destroyed by faith. In the sacred grove of Olympia, in western Greece, there once stood a statue that ancient visitors described with reverence bordering on religious ecstasy. The statue of Zeus, created around 435 BC by the sculptor Phidias, was housed in the temple of Zeus and depicted the king of the Greek gods seated on an elaborate throne. The figure was approximately 40 feet tall. Zeus's skin was rendered in ivory, his robes in gold. In one hand he held a statue of Nike, goddess of victory, in the other, a scepter topped with an eagle. His throne was decorated with precious stones, ebony, and scenes from Greek mythology. Ancient writers noted that those who saw it felt they had glimpsed something divine, that Phidias had somehow captured the essence of godhood itself. The statue stood for approximately 8 centuries. But its fate was sealed not by earthquake or fire in its original location, but by a profound shift in human belief. In 391 AD, the Roman Emperor Theodosius I issued decrees banning pagan worship throughout the empire. Christianity was now the official religion. Pagan temples were closed, their rituals forbidden. According to historical accounts, the statue was transported to Constantinople, the Christian capital, where it was installed in the palace of a wealthy collector named Lausus, displayed as a relic of a vanished world. Then, in 475 AD, a fire swept through the palace. The statue of Zeus, gold, ivory, wood, and centuries of reverence, was consumed by flames. It's worth pausing here because this detail changes how we see the story. This was not merely a matter of natural decay. This was the deliberate erasure of one belief system by another. The statue's destruction represents something larger. The way human civilizations periodically shed their pasts, sometimes violently, in service of new truths. Today, we know the statue primarily through descriptions in ancient texts and its depiction on Greek coins. The workshop where Phidias created it has been excavated in Olympia, and archaeologists have found tools, molds, and even a cup inscribed with the sculptor's name. But of the masterpiece itself, nothing tangible remains. World 4, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, destroyed twice. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, located on the western coast of modern-day Turkey, was renowned as one of the most magnificent structures in the ancient world. Built and rebuilt over centuries, its final form, completed around 550 BC, featured 127 marble columns, each 60 feet high, supporting a roof that sheltered a colossal statue of the goddess Artemis. Ancient writers marveled at its scale and beauty. It was not merely a temple but an economic center, a treasury, and a sanctuary where refugees could claim asylum. For the city of Ephesus, it was the beating heart of civic life. The temple's first destruction came in 356 BC, at the hands of a man named Herostratus. According to the historian Theopompus, Herostratus set fire to the temple deliberately, with the sole motivation of achieving immortality through infamy. He wanted his name remembered forever. Ephesian authorities were so appalled they attempted to erase his name from all records and forbade anyone from speaking it. Yet here we are, more than 2 millennia later, still speaking it. His plan, perversely, succeeded. The Ephesians rebuilt the temple even more grandly than before. This second temple stood for nearly 600 years. But its final destruction came not from a single dramatic act, but from a slow erosion of relevance. In 268 AD, invading Goths sacked Ephesus and damaged the temple. It was repaired, but never fully restored. Then came the rise of Christianity. In 391 AD, the same year that sealed the fate of Zeus's statue, pagan temples throughout the Roman Empire were ordered closed. The Temple of Artemis was abandoned. Over the following centuries, it was gradually dismantled. Marble was taken for other buildings, including the construction of the nearby Church of St. John. By the time archaeologists began searching for it in the 19th century, almost nothing remained above ground. Today, a single reconstructed column marks the spot where one of antiquity's most celebrated buildings once stood. There is something quietly devastating about that image, a lone column rising from marshy ground, testifying to a grandeur that has almost entirely vanished. World 5, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, word becomes legacy. In the ancient city of Halicarnassus, now Bodrum, Turkey, a grief-stricken widow named Artemisia commissioned a tomb for her husband, King Mausolus, who died in 353 BC. This was not to be an ordinary tomb. She hired the finest Greek architects and sculptors to create a monument that would preserve his memory for all time. The result was a structure approximately 150 feet tall, combining Greek, Egyptian, and Lycian architectural elements. It featured a rectangular base supporting 36 columns, topped by a step pyramid, crowned with a sculpture of a chariot pulled by 4 horses. Intricate marble friezes depicted battles and mythological scenes. It was so impressive that the building gave us a word we still use today, a mausoleum, meaning any grand tomb. The structure stood largely intact for nearly 1,800 years, surviving the decline of Halicarnassus and the various empires that rose and fell around it. But beginning in the 12th century, a series of earthquakes gradually weakened it. By the 15th century, the Knights of St. John, a crusading military order, had established themselves in Bodrum. They needed stone to strengthen their castle against Ottoman attack. The ruined mausoleum provided exactly what they needed. The knights systematically dismantled what remained, using the marble blocks and sculptures to build fortifications. Some of the decorative friezes were even ground into lime for mortar. When British archaeologist Charles Newton excavated the site in 1857, he found sections of the famous friezes built into castle walls, preserved by their very repurposing. Today, those surviving sculptures reside in the British Museum. They are exquisite, dynamic battle scenes, figures frozen in marble action, testament to the skill of ancient Greek sculptors. Yet they are fragments, torn from their original context, survivors of a structure that no longer exists. The mausoleum's legacy is peculiar. Its name outlived its physical form. We remember what it was called more clearly than what it looked like. World 6, the Colossus of Rhodes, the giant who fell. On the Greek island of Rhodes, at the entrance to the harbour, there once stood a bronze statue of unprecedented scale. The Colossus of Rhodes, completed around 280 BC, depicted the sun god Helios and stood approximately 108 feet tall, roughly the height of the modern Statue of Liberty. It was built to celebrate Rhodes's successful defense against a siege by Demetrius Poliorcetes. The Rhodians melted down abandoned siege weapons and bronze offerings to create this colossal figure, a symbol of freedom, resilience, and divine favor. Ancient writers recorded that it took 12 years to construct and was an engineering marvel. Contrary to later artistic depictions, it did not straddle the harbor entrance. No bronze statue of that era could have been engineered to span such a distance. More likely, it stood on a promontory beside the harbor, one arm raised, holding perhaps a torch or wreath. But the Colossus had the shortest lifespan of any of the 7 wonders. In 226 BC, just 56 years after its completion, a powerful earthquake struck Rhodes. The statue snapped at the knees and toppled. Here the story takes an unusual turn. The broken Colossus lay where it fell for nearly 900 years. Ancient sources tell us that an oracle warned the Rhodians not to rebuild it, and they heeded this warning. The ruins themselves became a tourist attraction. The Roman author Pliny the Elder wrote that even lying broken on the ground, the statue was so large that few people could wrap their arms around its thumb. The statue's final disappearance came in 654 AD, when Arab forces captured Rhodes. According to accounts, they sold the bronze remains as scrap metal. It reportedly took 900 camels to transport the fragments. If this account is accurate, and historians debate its reliability, it means that one of the ancient world's most celebrated monuments ended its existence not in glorious ruin, but rendered down for raw material, its bronze melted and repurposed into objects whose makers likely never knew they had once formed part of a god. World 7, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, guiding light extinguished. We conclude with the Lighthouse of Alexandria, known as the Pharos, a name that gave us the word for lighthouse in several languages, Fair in French, Pharaoh in Italian and Spanish. Built around 280 BC on the small island of Pharos in Alexandria's harbour, it was commissioned by Ptolemy II to guide ships safely through the treacherous waters approaching Egypt's coast. Ancient accounts describe it as between 330 and 450 feet tall, making it one of the tallest man-made structures of the ancient world, second only to the Great Pyramid. The lighthouse consisted of 3 tiers, a square base, an octagonal middle section, and a circular top supporting a fire that burned constantly. A system of mirrors and polished metal reflectors amplified the light, making it visible from up to 35 miles away. During the day, smoke from the fire served as a signal. Ships approaching Alexandria saw this beacon long before they saw land. But the Pharos was more than merely functional. It was an architectural statement, decorated with statues and inscriptions. According to one account, the architect Sostratus cleverly ensured his own immortality by carving his name in the stone, then covering it with plaster bearing the pharaoh's dedication. Over time, the plaster wore away, revealing Sostratus's name beneath. The lighthouse guided ships for more than 1,000 years, surviving the decline of the Ptolemaic dynasty, Roman rule, and the early Islamic period. But between the 10th and 14th centuries, a series of earthquakes progressively damaged it. Each tremor weakened the structure further. By the time the Mamluk Sultan Kate Bey arrived in the late 15th century, what remained was too damaged to repair. In 1480, Sultan Kate Bey built a fortress on the exact site, incorporating some of the fallen lighthouse stones into its foundations and walls. That fortress still stands today. If you visit, you can see granite blocks with carved symbols that archaeologists believe came from the ancient Pharos, repurposed once again. In 1994, French archaeologists discovered substantial ruins of the lighthouse beneath the waters of Alexandria's harbour. Columns, statues, and enormous stone blocks lie scattered on the seafloor, a submerged memory of a light that once guided thousands of ships safely home. 7 wonders. 6 lost. 1 surviving, but transformed. Looking at these stories together, patterns emerge. Earthquakes destroyed or damaged at least 5 of the 7. Human hands dismantled 3 for building materials. Religious transformation erased 2. War and political upheaval contributed to the decline of several. And time, patient time, wore away at all of them. But perhaps there is something more here than a simple catalogue of destruction. These monuments were built by people who believed, as we still believe, that great works can transcend mortality. They invested extraordinary resources, ingenuity, and hope into creating permanence. And yet permanence eluded them. This is not a cause for despair. Rather, it is a reminder that the meaning of these structures resided not solely in their physical stones, but in the human aspiration they represented. The Hanging Gardens, whether they existed precisely as described or not, have inspired gardens for millennia. The Colossus of Rhodes gave us an enduring symbol of human-scale divinity. The mausoleum left us a word that honors the dead to this day. Memory, it seems, can be more durable than marble. These wonders survive not as places we can visit, save one, but as ideas we can contemplate. As stories we continue to tell. There is a certain comfort in that. Our works may crumble, but the fact that we attempted them, that we reached for something greater than ourselves, that record persists. It echoes in the texts of ancient historians, in archaeological fragments, in the words we still use without thinking of their origin. The 7 wonders remind us that human achievement is always a conversation between ambition and acceptance, between our desire to create lasting beauty and our need to come to terms with the fact that nothing physical truly lasts forever. What endures is not the stone itself, but our continued willingness to be moved by what our ancestors attempted. That is the true wonder, not that these structures were built, but that we still care that they were. If you've stayed with me through this quiet exploration, I'm grateful. These are stories that reward patience, that ask us to think across centuries and contemplate what it means to build, to lose, and to remember. I create these documentaries for viewers who appreciate depth over spectacle, who value careful research and measured reflection. If that describes you, you're welcome to subscribe. I release new explorations of history's forgotten places and untold stories every week. As for the 7 wonders, I'd be genuinely interested to know which of these stories resonated most with you. Are you drawn to the mysteries like the Hanging Gardens, or to the more documented tragedies like the Lighthouse of Alexandria? I read every thoughtful comment, and your perspectives often shape future videos. Thank you for spending this time in reflection with me. Until we meet again, may you find wonder not only in what has survived, but in the very act of remembering what has not.